It's Thursday, the 9th of May 2023. It's the usual time, 9 p.m., and you're up late with Sion Marshall. The show begins right now. A wonderful Thursday evening to you. All those usual viewers who stay up late with Sion Marshall. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Sion Marshall. Now, let me welcome those viewers again who are viewing from Asbot News Network. Good night to you. And we have been joined on a number of occasions by listeners on Old School FM. So good night to you as well. Tonight, as always, I have an exciting program for you. Now, two apologies to make. One, I am not in the best of health. Uh, you know, I was doing fine all along, but then it appears that I have picked up a virus somewhere. So my nose is running and I may sneeze occasionally. If it gets too bad, we'd see how it works out, how it works out. But for now, we're having the program. I'm here, excuse me, and I am ready to go. Secondly, I did have a particular program planned for you tonight, but unfortunately, my guest canceled on me last minute this afternoon, and so the program I had planned for today isn't the one that is coming right now. But that's fine because I always have backup plans. I always have contingency measures. So the quality of this evening's program is not going to be any less than you're used to. It's just that tonight we do not have a special guest. It's me and you. You're staying up late with me this evening. Now, many times, Vincentians would hear about certain international organizations, monetary organizations. You would hear about the World Bank and you'd hear about the IMF. And oftentimes, there there's a lot of confusion, for want of a better word, lots of disagreement around statements put out by the IMF and by the World Bank regarding St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Recently, the IMF concluded what is referred to as its for consultation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And usually, what that means is a team from the IMF would travel to the country and meet with different stakeholders, private sector, public sector, government, opposition, and so forth, and make their assessments. And they would then publish a full report that lays out the results of their consultation. But before that full report, there is a statement published. It's called a concluding statement, and it gives a snapshot of some of the issues tackled and the opinion of the team of experts from the IMF, what their conclusions are. Now, one of the things about it is that depending on the contents of the report or the concluding statement, you would get an idea of who's running with what. So, generally speaking, if the opposition feels that the statement offers them some fodder for them to run with, they would quote extensively and refer extensively to the statement. And so the government is in a position of having to defend and explain. But on the flip side, if there is anything positive coming out, they do not just remain silent, they question the legitimacy of the report then. Just like a note, fantastic, I'll run with it. If it's positive, I do not just hush my mouth and don't say nothing. No, I, and meaning the opposition, would delegitimize, question the credibility, question the integrity of the exports, so as to question the output of the report. Now, I am not sure how much discussion has been going on in St. Vincent and the Grenadines about this because it was recently published, the concluding statement. But I decided that tonight, what I would do is go through some of the points of the concluding statement so that Vincentians can get an understanding, an idea of what the IMF thinks about how our country is doing, how our economy is doing. Now, when I quote or I read what it says, don't get vexed with me. Don't argue with me. I am merely telling you what the statement says, so you can get vexed with the IMF if you want to. If it's not something that you agree with, if you think that they're mistaken and you know better and you know more, then you can get upset with the IMF. No, I believe there's some people who are saying good night. So let me say good night to everybody. Um, right now, the first thing I want you to do is this. For those of you who, now, many individuals, many of you may not be interested in go and do all of this. So I've done it for you. But for those of you who are interested, on the screen is the website imf.org, or you can just simply go to Google and type in IMF Article 5 consultation concluding statements or anything like that. The terms that you want to get familiar with, or the terms you want to remember if you want to search it, would be IMF concluding statement or IMF Article 4 statement and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You could put St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you could put SVG, it's up to you. All right. So that is how you can find it. All right. Uh right. So it's on the screen there. You can have a look at it. You can type it in yourself. You can determine if you want to go and look at the statement yourself and read it, go through it, see what it says, double check anything I said tonight, and get an understanding of what the IMF says about your country, our country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So let's talk a little bit about the statement, some areas of content. The first slide I want to show you, well, it's not a slide. I've done it like I've done it like a slideshow, so I'll have slides for you to read for yourself. But this is the first thing that the IMF says, or rather, this gives an overview. It is, as I said to you earlier, a concluding statement that describes the preliminary findings of the IMF staff at the end of an official visit or mission. So the mission has just completed. The visit has just been completed. They've chatted who they wanted to chat with. They've spoken to who they want to speak with. And now they are, hold on one second. Something is not happening right here. Something is not, yes. So they would do their thing, and then they would issue some preliminary findings. So remember I said to you earlier that the official full report would come out a little later on, right? So this is what we're looking at, the preliminary findings of the IMF team that came to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what they're looking at is how our economy is doing, how our country is doing. They're looking at the policies that the government and how those policies are impacting Vincentians. Are they good for the country? Are they bad for the country? Now, the IMF gave in its first paragraph, in the first paragraph of I have my iPad there, so I'm making sure I have everything sorted out. The where is it now? Here's one of the things that stood out to me that the IMF stated, and you can read it yourself. I'm putting it up there for you to read it. It says St. Vincent and the Grenadines has achieved a robust recovery from recent compounded shocks, supported by the authorities' decisive policy responses, large-scale investment projects, and robust growth in tourism. The outlook is favorable, but subject to downside risks, mainly stemming from the uncertain external environment. It says, in addition, the economy is facing challenges from a rapidly aging population and the ever present threat of natural disasters and climate change. Amid the still high public debt policies need to be calibrated to continue to build buffers and resilience to support sustainable and inclusive growth. So I'm not going to come here and pick out things that I think are favorable. I want you to understand what the IMF is saying. So, one, according to the IMF, based on what their discussions revealed, there's been robust growth. So we rebounded robustly, and robust don't mean weak. Robust mean a nice strong rebound, and we're rebounding from compounded shocks. What's that? Well, a shock that meet a shock that meet a shock. And all of us know what we're talking about. In our region, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the only country to have gone through what it did. We had COVID, we had volcanic eruption, and we had a hurricane. One, two, three. A triple threat. No other country in the region had a volcanic eruption. Some, depending on their proximity, may have been hit by Hurricane Elsa in varying degrees. But we had to deal with all three. And the IMF that came here previously, last year and so forth, they're coming and they're saying, look, we're looking at what is happening and things are picking up, but not slowly, not in a weak drag, but robustly. There it is. Robust recovery. Our country has been able to achieve robust recovery. That's according to the IMF, not Sion Marshall. And I think at this point, you would want to reflect and ask yourself, honestly, looking around, what are you seeing? What are the signs that you're seeing? You cannot tell me that the IMF team comes in for a week, meets with the different stakeholders, goes around the country, and somehow they can see the effects of robust recovery, but Vincentians living there can't. Something don't sound to right with that. So you ask yourself honestly, honestly, reflect on what we're talking about. Reflect on what you're reading on the screen, and reflect on what you can go to the internet and pull up for yourself. and ask yourself whether or not you can see what the IMF is talking about. Now, one of the things that the IMF pointed out among the challenges, the IMF says there's high debt, and we know that. The government has been transparent with us, telling us when they're borrowing, why they're borrowing, how much they're borrowing. An aging population, a rapidly aging population. And this particular situation of a rapidly aging population always brings the national insurance services that are responsible for pensions into sharp focus. And unfortunately, and I must say unfortunately, the, the debate around it lacks honesty and genuineness. Too many individuals who either do not know or decide to be willfully dishonest distort the information that they should be giving the public and create more fear and alarm about what is happening at the NIS than anything else. But this is a serious situation and something that the NIS and the government has to address, because if you're having a rapidly aging population, I remember recently uh, the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, was making the point that Bajans aren't having enough children, which brings the sustainability of the population into question. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a rapidly aging population. Maybe we're not making enough children, I don't know. But it means that at some point you'll have a very large dependent population, which would be the pensioners, and a smaller, younger population will have to pay for their pension while at the same time saving up for their own pensions. Scheme with the NIS was generously done. When it was created, formulated quite generously. So individuals get significant pensions, especially those working with the government in the government sector who get both a government and an NIS pension. It is not unheard of to find out that an individual can retire and be almost as well off, or possibly even better off than they were when they were working. So I digress, just to raise the issue of the pensions, because of one of the challenges that the IMF found, which was a rapidly aging population. The next challenge naturally is the exogenous shocks, imported inflation, and the issues of climate change. Now, it means that our government has to spend money and invest in what is called climate resilient infrastructure. By the way, cups coming to St. Vincent and the Grenadines soon, eh? So if you're interested in getting a cup, let me know. Send a message to Uplift with Sion Marshall, and let me know that you want a cup, and we go hook you up. All right, cups coming to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right? So the government has to spend money, unfortunately, or realistically, that's unfortunately, that's our reality, in ensuring that we build infrastructure that can withstand some of the worst or more extreme weather weather events. So, for example, if you go to Georgetown and other areas, Montreal and so forth, where new bridges have been built recently, you would see that the columns of those bridges are much thicker than you're used to, and you would see as well that those bridges have been raised even higher than normal. So there's a bit of a ramp up and over, because the floods that are coming down now are heavy with lots of water getting to some heights that were never before seen, and they're mashing up bridges. So in reconstructing bridges that were damaged, the government has to ensure that these new bridges can withstand extreme weather events. And that, if you remember, that is one of the reasons why we have we've been having increases in our public debt, because we have to borrow money. We have to borrow money to do the bridges across the country, the sea defense and the river defense and so forth. But but the IMF has seen what we are doing, and they are commending us. The IMF says the authorities have stepped up efforts to strengthen structural and financial resilience, including by incorporating resilience to new infrastructure, adopting a disaster risk financing strategy, tapping green climate fund, and enhancing the disaster management plan and legislation. So, yes, we recognize that there is not a lot we can do. We can't stop hurricanes. We can't prevent them. We can't stop the flooding. Climate change is real, it's here. The major emitters of the world continue to do what they're doing, and it's affecting us as small island developing states. But the IMF is commending Siemens and Grenadines, excuse me. The IMF is commending Siemens and Grenadines for its work in doing its part in investing in infrastructure that would withstand, that's resilient, and that would withstand the most extreme weather events. We are currently building a port, and a lot of proper planning has gone into the port because, well, one, it's a port, it's right at the waterfront, and two, it's reclaimed, it's on reclaimed land, and the government has done its part in ensuring that every bit of study and research goes into the construction of that port to make sure that it is climate resilient. You know, one of the challenges we have, and I move away from the government's uh, role or the government's efforts in climate resilient infrastructure, is when during the last couple of years, when individuals have had their home destroyed, whether through the volcano or which resulted in lahars coming down, and there's flooding, the government embarked on a program to relocate homeowners and to put them in, insurance has a policy. It's called indemnity. They put you back in a similar position that you are in. They make sure that at least you don't profit, at least in a similar position. Our government, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in many instances, or rather in the majority of instances, ensure that individuals who were impacted negatively by weather events were put in a better position than they were. They were individuals whose homes were not the most sturdy. They have brand new homes. The individuals who, you know, didn't own a home but occupied, whether through renting and so on, people were provided homes. And the important thing is that these homes are climate resilient. I remember the first set of homes that were built in Orange Hill that came from Trinidad and Tobago. I think it was 27 or 28 of them. Those homes, those structures are built to withstand Category 4 hurricanes. So that it's not just the public infrastructure that the government is ensuring is resilient, but also as it embarks on the program of relocating individuals whose homes are damaged, the government is also ensuring that those Vincentians are getting proper homes that can withstand extreme weather events. And the IMF, that was in St. Vincent and Grenadines and did its assessment, was able to acknowledge the work that the government is doing in that regard to ensure that there is resilience because those outside shocks, those exogenous shocks, are one of the threats that is always lurking over us. At any time, we can have a hurricane, excuse me, or we can have heavy rains leading to flooding. And so our government has to ensure and is ensuring, according to the IMF, based on their assessment. Again, I didn't do the assessment. I'll show you where you could go and see and see the document and read it. Based on that, the IMF is saying that the government is doing some good work in minimize in minimizing the possible or likely impact of these events by making sure that they invest in climate resilient infrastructure. Now, there's something that stood out to me, and I want you to see this. Where is this now? I This was the most interesting thing I saw, and I underlined them in blue. Now, the stay-over arrivals approach pre-pandemic levels in 2023. That means that the amount of stay-over visits we had before COVID, because remember when COVID hit, planes stopped flying, everybody was locking down and so forth. Well, I am told the IMF is saying that the growth that we had seen before COVID hit, when airlines had just started to come in and so forth, because we had the brand new airport, the stay-over arrivals got back to that level in 2023. And it is because of the airlift, the improved airlift, Argyle International. But here's something that some individuals may not want to hear because it may not suit them politically. Formal employment surpassed pre-pandemic level in 2022 and is estimated to have continued to grow in 2023. Now, what it is saying here is that the employment situation that existed before COVID, we know COVID came and people were laid off, businesses closed, and so forth. So that spiked, that caused an increase in unemployment. And that was the case globally. That was the case globally. So COVID came 2020, 2021. We had the throes of it. We had the volcanic eruption and so forth, and the hurricane. But by 2022, the following year, formal employment had rebounded robustly, which is the term that the IMF is using, had rebounded robustly to the point where it had now surpassed or gone beyond what it was in 2022, and there was continued growth in formal employment in 2023. And I suspect with everything that is happening, sandals, the port project, road projects across the country and so forth, that that growth would continue in 2024. So that's a positive thing. It it somehow makes you question, and note I say question the narrative by some about these high rates of unemployment, because the IMF is saying that formal employment surpassed what it was before COVID in 2022, and the strong growth continued in 2023. It continued to grow in 2023, but there was a concern. It says nevertheless, and this goes back to the program we did with where are we? I'm going to put it back up. Where is it now? I want to put it up because I wanted to see what we're talking about. Where did that go? Okay, I can't. I just had. Oh, here it is. Right. It says, nevertheless, recent compounded shocks have left a lasting negative impact on employment of young men. What's happening with the young men? When we had that discussion a few weeks ago, and what our guests from the youth department was making the point that they wanted more men to get involved with the ES program. You hear contractors and other employers talk about how difficult it is uh, men on a consistent basis to do their work. And the IMF that visited St. Vincent, the team that visited St. Vincent is echoing that, reiterating that whatever happened, the shocks, the COVID and the hurricane and all those kind of things, and I suspect that there are other factors as well, but those factors have negatively impacted the employment of our young men. We need to reach our young men. We need to reach our young men. No. I'm just laying out some of the points. You can go and read it if you wish. I'm sure you'd have discussions of this on radio, so you'd get the opportunity to hear more about it, and maybe even share your bits, whether it's in a calling program or whatever. But I decided that I would introduce you, give you a bit of a taste tonight to whet your appetite. So at least when you hear about it tomorrow, depending on what you're hearing, you could say, but no, that makes no sense. That's not true, because last night on Upload with Sion Marshall, he dealt with that, and he actually showed us, we read for ourselves on the screen what the IMF was saying. So that's the goal here tonight. No. Let's talk growth, because the IMF talks about robust rebound. The IMF talks about uh, um, arrivals surpassing pre-pandemic levels, employment surpassing pre-pandemic levels, talks about some of the investment that is coming here, specifically in tourism and the building of the port. Then it says, sorry, not that one. It says growth reached 3.1% in 2022 and is estimated to have accelerated to 5.8 in 2023. 2023, 5.8. You know the term used, accelerated. It gives a type of an impression. You're in a car and you're accelerating. So there was like it took a pace. It picked up pace. The growth that our country saw in 2022 and 2023 from 3.1 to 5.8, it almost doubled, It almost doubled. So it took up real pace. Now, help me out here. Please. Help me out here. If, according to the IMF, there was a robust rebound after the shocks of COVID and volcano, excuse me, if according to the IMF, the airlift has surpassed pre-pandemic levels, if according to IMF, the unemployment, or rather the employment situation, again, surpassed the pre-pandemic levels and continues to grow. If according to the IMF, we had 3.1% growth in 2022, and there was acceleration in 2023. Ask yourself the question, what is the basis of some of the discussion that you hear about how horribly Simmons Nigerianis is doing, how there's no growth, there's such massive unemployment that the country is in its worship ever? Ask yourself, what is the basis for those comments? Ask yourself that question. Because both can be true at the same time. Both can be true during separate periods, in separate periods. So at one period, you can have high unemployment, no growth, and the economy can be horrible. But you can have accelerated growth, increase and growth in employment to pre-pandemic levels. You having the airlift and so forth, and lots of things happening because of investment both in the public sector and private sector. All of these things happening, to me, but I am an economist, cannot translate or cannot, rather, let me put it differently. To me, those two things conflict each other. Those two things conflict each other. All of the things that the IMF is saying, and some of the discussions that you hear on radio, and you might hear it at local shops and so on, they cannot exist together. Now, I want to show you something else, because I have a lot of things here now. The IMF says, where is it now? I think I have it somewhere here. Not this one. I would talk about that too. I would talk about that too, but that's not the one I wanted to. It is somewhere here, and I have it, but I can't find it. I can't find it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? No, I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it. When you have to be you're responsible for your own information. You are responsible for your own information. You have to make the effort to find where credible, reliable information exists. You can't always expect that the information, the right information, would come and drop in your lap. You are responsible for your own information. And I'm happy that you choose this podcast, this show, Uplift with Sion Marshall, as a one of the platforms, one of the medium for your information. I'm happy for that. And I take my responsibility extremely serious to ensure that I bring you actual information. So if you notice, it's reading from the IMF concluding statement. I give you what the IMF is saying, and then I can go further and give some examples or give you some context. But I'm telling you what the IMF is saying, and I'm pointing you to the direction or in the direction to go and learn further. Now, this next point I want to make is one that it hit home to me because one of the concerns I have, one of the criticisms I sometimes make is the fact that we tend to be reluctant to give individuals credit where they are due credit. And too often, it is not until our Vincentian leaders or Vincentian citizens travel outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that they are recognized for their ideas, for their innovation, for their efforts. I'm going to put this up. I'm going to put this up. Underline it. It says, the team welcomes the establishment of the Prime Ministerial Advisory Council on Youth and the recently launched comprehensive education reform with focuses on curriculum reforms and expansion of post-secondary and technical vocational education and training, which will help reduce skill mismatches and integrate youth into the labor market. You know, when you talk about the reforms and the expansion of post-secondary and technical vocational education, you have to talk about the work that the government has done on those technical vocational centers in Camden Park, in Barley, in Georgetown, in Kingstown, equipping them so that the young people can be trained in skills. You talk about the work done at the community college, the Division of Technical Vocational Education. And we had Mr. Bowens on here the other night, a few weeks ago. And it is those same individuals which were trained in automotive engineering, mechanical engineering, air conditioning refrigeration, welding, culinary arts, bartending. Those are the same individuals who are being gobbled up by the hundreds in the developments that are happening in St. Great needs. Excuse me. And so that is why we could talk about the fact that since the pandemic, there has been acceleration in the employment situation as more and more and more people are employed. But sometimes people choose not to see it. And worse yet, they refuse to put themselves in the way to take advantage of these opportunities. And then they complain. Excuse me. Prime Ministerial Advisory Council on Youth. Something that was criticized by certain segments of our society, of our Vincentian society, mocked, referred to as token. But the IMF can see the value of this committee. The IMF can see the value of the SET program and the on-site program and its impact on training. The IMF can see the value of the investment that the government is making or has made and continues to make in the technical centers, Barley, Camden Park, Kingston, Georgetown. People are able to learn dressmaking and some electrical courses and so forth. And what the IMF is saying is that these type of initiatives reduce skills mismatch and they help to integrate young people into the labor force, into the labor market. So that's commendation there. That's commendation for the work that the government is doing. Now, remember, if the report was a horrible one, if it has said that we are lagging behind in terms of the pre-pandemic situation, if it had said that our unemployment situation is widening, the gap is widening, if it had said that our infrastructure and so on is substandard, pointing fingers at the government. Well, if that is the case, when the IMF says there's robust rebound, things like employment and airlift and so forth have surpassed the pre-pandemic levels, that there's growth and accelerated growth. These are all terms used by the IMF in their concluding statement. Now, take it with a pinch, a spoonful, or the entire pong of salt. That is up to you. That is completely up to you. But I'm just giving you as it is, or as quote unquote old people used to say, may I sell it or me buy it. And if the IMF is credible, if it says we didn't grow, then the same IMF has to be credible if it says we grow. And if the IMF says we had 20% unemployment and you run with that, then when it says that we have accelerated employment, take it up and run with it the same way. Don't question it now because, it doesn't suit your narrative. Don't question it now because it doesn't suit your narrative. Accept it for what it is, for what it's worth. Now, a couple of weeks ago, The program I did, we spoke about celebrating Vincentianness, celebrating St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the initial comments, the initial findings, the initial report of this concluding statement by the team from the IMF is something that we can be hopeful about. As a matter of fact, I think that's the term they use. They also addressed issues like the banking, the strength of our banking sector, saying that non-performing loans. Let me put that up here because I want nobody to say I'm putting things in them out. Non-performing loans has declined from its peak in 2022 and remain below regional averages. Non-performing loans, NPLs, have declined from the 2022 peak and remain below regional averages. So whatever the regional average is for non-performing loans, those are loans that people borrow and ain't paying back. We are below that average. And what is important? What is important is this, because it says with no significant impact from the of the pandemic moratorium. What I mean, you remember when there was COVID and even volcano, banks had said, began into arrangement to say, people who lose their jobs and so on, they have a period of time where they wouldn't pay the loan, a moratorium, so they wouldn't pay the loan for a certain period of time. So the loans weren't being paid. I don't know if those loans were also considered non-performing. Well, naturally, if you ain't working and you ain't paying, your loan is non-performing. The IMF assessing that says, look, after the period of the moratorium expired, people started back to pay the loan. And why? Why? Because employment increased. Employment went back up. People got jobs. People got jobs. Remember, by 2022, we were back to pre-pandemic levels of formal employment. Think about it. And so people got back their jobs and they were able to service their loans, keeping our percentage of non-performing loans lower than the Caribbean average. That's our banking sector for you. That's our banking sector. And then the work that the government does through regulation and supervision, money laundering and so forth. Those policies, those things put in place continue to help us to address the challenges surrounding correspondent banking. So work is being done. And I use the word hopeful. If I'm being a little cautious. And I'm avoiding words like excited, happy, you know? And I'm using words like hopeful. I mean, some individuals reading the concluding statement might be excited for St. Vincent and Grenadines. And you know what? I encourage them be excited. Some may be happy. And I encourage them keep being happy. Others may be a bit more cautious and express optimism and hope with the contents of this concluding statement. And that's fine. But what I would fail to accept What I would fail to accept is pessimism. What I would fail to accept is downright denying of the good work that our country, through the effort of our public servants, through the effort of our private sector, through the effort of our leaders, our country has been able to do over the last couple of years, bring us out of a pre-pandemic and pandemic situation of uh, challenges to formal employment, to economic growth and so forth, to a period, a time, a place where we can see not just growth, but accelerated growth. To see not just a rebound, but a robust rebound. To see a situation where our government is putting things in place to create a sustainable path to development. Physical infrastructure, education, healthcare, public investment. You know, we know once the port is finished, we move on to the hospital. And all of these things would continue to drive growth. We know we can expect many more things to come. Many, many more things to come. But I go back to something that I said jumped out at me. And it's this one. Nevertheless, recent compounded shocks have left a lasting negative impact on employment of young men. We need to rescue our young men. Whatever is happening, it is negatively impacting them. And for some reason, we have to go look for them. Excuse me. We have to meet them where they are. Because somehow they ain't coming and they ain't finding us. And so maybe we need to take the approach where we find them. I know old people that say you don't take donkey to standpipe. I ain't calling nobody donkey here, so please don't uh, uh, misconstrue what I'm saying here. But maybe it's time for us to reach out for young men and give them the assistance, the guidance they need to find the path to meaningful employment and a meaningful life. And with that, let me give you my 2 cents. I saw on my final thoughts. I saw on in the media news that JetBlue would be flying to St. Vincent and Grenadines later this year from New York. This is great news. So by the end of the year, it's possible that we can have an additional 2 airlines flying from North America to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This will complement already what we have. CAL, American Airline, and Air Canada. This is fantastic news. It is fantastic news because it makes a lie out of those who said planes would never land. No planes would ever land. We are seeing them landing. They are landing in the numbers. Not just increased number of flights per week, but also increase numbers of airlines. We continue to grow, we continue to develop, and all of us as Vincentians can be absolutely proud of what is happening in our country. Until next Thursday night, when I'm back with you with another edition of this program, this is Sion Marshall saying, thank you so much for, for being a part of the program, and have yourself a good night.